I'm redoing a short video I did about Kendrick Johnson's body and the vertical mat because I made a minor mistake. However, I know that the Kendrick Johnson followers will blow it out of proportion and they will say, see, she made a mistake, therefore a murder occurred. Which, you know, going from A to B with that group, it's just insane. But that's what they'll say. So I want to go back and try to make it as accurate as I possibly can. And I'll tell you what my mistake was. But this is a three-dimensional rendition from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about how KJ got into the mat and how his body was found. So in the old gym, there were bleachers next to these mats. These mats were not usually stored this way. These are wrestling and cheerleading mats, thick rubber mats. But they were pushed up into the corner over Christmas break so the custodians could clean the floor of the old gym. Usually the kids, there might be one or two vertical mats, or there could be horizontal mats lying around, and they would store their things in there. And it wasn't because they didn't have lockers, although there might have been some kids that were doing it because they literally couldn't afford a locker. But in KJ's case, they just wanted to share a pair of shoes that they all liked. His friends testified that they shared shoes and they kept them in the mats, and they would usually tip up the mats. So tip up to me means they lifted it up from a horizontal position so they'd slide out, or maybe there was one or two that were sticking up in a vertical position and they leaned them over to get stuff out. But whatever the case, the day that KJ went missing, which was January 10th, this is how they were in the corner of the gym. And as you can count here, it was like 15 or 20. So he was found in the second one from the corner, and he could not possibly have rocked it over. And he was found head down, so nobody in the gym could have heard him. If you've ever been in a high school gym, you know that the sound just echoes off of the walls and the ceiling and the floor. And so if there's any people moving around in there, that it's just loud. So that's probably why no one could hear him, because he was blocked in place by all these rubber mats muffling the sound, and he was head down. Now, when I looked at some of the kids' testimony and talked to other kids, everybody said his feet were sticking up. So I assumed that they were sticking up a little bit, and I think I read something to that effect somewhere. But I went back and looked at one particular testimony from the coach that he did not find KJ's body. There were students who found KJ's body, and they called the coach over. So I went back and looked at his testimony, and he says when he climbed up on the bleachers and looked down, he saw KJ's feet, he says, about 2 feet down in the mat. So his feet were not visible from the top, and I made that mistake. I thought, based on what other students said when they said they were sticking up, I thought that they were sticking up a little bit outside the mat. So I've just deleted my first video, and I'm redoing this to try to make the same points, but also in order to correct my mistake. But my mistake in that should not be used to convict anybody of murder. And that would be incredibly foolish, but that is exactly how the mob that is going along behind the Kendrick Johnson family, that is exactly how they think. So what a lot of people don't understand, and this is the most important part of this, is that there are no photographs of KJ in the vertical mat. Every photograph that you see on the web that has him inside the mat, that was taken after the mat was pulled down. And what happened was the coach was giving students a test, and they did exactly the same thing that we believe KJ did. They climbed up on these bleachers, they crawled across, and they were sitting up here to take their test, and that's when a student saw his feet. So they called the coach came over, the coach talks about in the case file that he reached down, tried to get a response. He says he grabbed KJ's ankle, tried to get a response, didn't get one. He got the other students, they pulled all these mats down. So everything that was in the mats, including the one that KJ was in, we believe that there was a black shoe at the bottom of that mat, but we can't be 100% sure because they pulled all these mats down and everything went flying. So when you see this, you have to imagine how he was in the vertical mat. And a lot of people have said, well, how could he be looking for shoes if they're tucked neatly behind his butt? They're not tucked neatly behind his butt. In the vertical mat, we think he kicked the shoes off up here at the top, trying to get somebody's attention, or they may have been on the sides of the mat and they fell in. So they ended up here behind him in the mat in a vertical position, and then when the mats were pulled down, his body shot about 2 feet out. The bottom of the mat that was on the floor, his body shot about 2 feet out in that direction. So when you're looking up 2 to 3 feet, about 3 feet, I believe, when you're looking at the pictures of him in the vertical mat, you have to, in the horizontal mat, you have to imagine that he was initially like this. When they pulled the mat down, his head and upper body shot forward in that direction, and that's when they determined beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was no longer alive, and that they needed to call the EMTs and the crime scene investigators to come and process a dead body being found at the high school. So this athletic shoe, we think it was in the bottom of the vertical mat, but we can't be 100% sure because everything went everywhere. But it's a black shoe, and the Kendrick Johnson family likes to say that there was no blood on it. There was no blood on the surface, but there was a lot of blood on it on the bottom. And it had to be put in a drying cabinet. But they put that shoe on national media with Victor Blackwell, and they all alleged that that was part of the cover-up. So he, just some particulars, he was 5 feet 9 inches. He was found with one arm over his head and one arm down along his side like he was reaching for something. The mat is 6 feet in width. I can come back to why people say, well, his shoulders were too big to fit in there. I'll come back to that. No, they weren't, because he was found with one arm up and one arm down. And there was a seal of blood around the bottom edge of the mat here on the inside. It was not just blood, it was blood and purge. And for folks who say, well, why was there any blood if he suffocated? It's because he was upside down and the body was dead for 20 hours, and blood starts to pool due to gravity going downward, and it starts to come out of any orifice. So eyes, ears, nose, mouth, it started leaking out. And then also inside your body, fluids start to decompose inside your stomach in particular, and inside your lungs. And those, it's called purge. And those bodily fluids start leaking out. And so there was this small pool of blood and purge that made a dried seal around the inside here. And then when they pulled the mats down, that seal was broken, and so you see some blood that has splashed down here. But there was other blood found in the gym, like on the wall behind these mats, and that blood was tested, and it was not KJ's. And they say that it had to be at least 2 weeks old, and therefore could not have been deposited when KJ's body went in the mat, because 2 weeks prior to him going in the mat, these mats were all down. So it could have been longer than that. Okay, but the point is, over Christmas break, the custodians put the mats in this position, and so the blood on the wall was behind these mats, and it was spattered blood. It was probably from somebody with a nosebleed playing basketball or something, and it could not have happened if the mat was standing up like this. So that's one reason they don't think that old dried blood had anything to do with KJ. It was at least 2 weeks old, maybe older. It was tested, despite what the KJ family says, and it was not KJ's. The only blood that was KJ's was found here with him in the mat and here on the floor around his body. There was another, I think it was a paper towel that was found in a trash can in one of the locker rooms, and it was not KJ's blood, it was a female's blood. And a young woman came forward who was in the band's color guard, I think it's called, that does the routines with the band, and she said they were practicing in the gym that evening, and she got a nosebleed, and she went into the locker room and dealt with her nosebleed. So all of these allegations that the crime scene investigators did not process the gym properly, that's nonsense. And I want to, especially you, to get an understanding of how his body was found, why he could not knock this mat over himself in there, why he could not have gotten to that mat and the stuff in the bottom of it from the outside. It would have taken several people to help him pull all these mats down and get to that one mat. And he was trying to get to his weightlifting class, which was outside down near the stadium. So it was a ways from the school. But people who say, oh, he was lured into the gym by a white girl. No, she's not on video anywhere. And he didn't have to be lured into the gym because he completed his 3rd block class and he wanted to get to his 4th block class. And you go through the gym, out the back door, and down to the field house. And it is believed he wanted to get these shoes that all the other students testified that they shared with him. Okay, so I hope that clears it up.